All right, so next thing we want to do is, let's go back to the same partners again. Assume the conversation where you were at. So kind of have a few little chit-chats to kind of get back in the conversational frame. And then what I want you to do now is I want to start taking all the things that you've heard them say, all the values, especially if you organize the values in a kind of hierarchy, and the drivers, but use the drivers, presenting the drivers in the language of their values. So the drivers, let's say, of tranquility and social contact. I'm not going to say you want tranquility and social contact. I'm going to have to frame that in terms of pleasantness, enjoying life, and so on, right? That pleasant peacefulness, just the shared fun of being with people that are pleasant and peaceful, enjoying themselves. Do you see how I've had to offer the driver in the context of the values that I was presented? Does that make sense? Sure. The example, just using Ralph because he was up here earlier on, was we have someone whose drivers are tranquility and social contact, say. That's our guesstimate at this point. And we have a value which is about enjoying life, having a pleasant surrounding, and having fun and enjoying stuff, right? So then you might offer them in terms of the list, you're going to offer them the driver, which is social contact and tranquility. But you can't just say, well, we'll give you some more tranquility and social contact as well, because those labels may not mean very much to him. So we need to frame them in the language or the vocabulary that he's given us. For example, well, here's something which, allows you to hang around with pleasant people. Hang around, social contact, pleasant people, the idea of tranquility and peace. So you can just ease back, kick back, enjoy yourself, have fun with good people. I mean, that's something, it's not something everyone wants, isn't it? It's not necessarily something everyone wants, but of course it's something that person wants, and that'll be good enough for everyone, as far as he's concerned. Does that make sense? So what you're basically doing is, you're echoing back to them their values and their drivers as a kind of summary. So you want this, you want this, you want this, you want this. Is that correct? Any ideas why you're doing that? There's a yes set, absolutely. What else is there?
Pacing.
You're pacing them, that's part of the yes set, absolutely.
Watching for a response.
You can watch for a response for each one, to making sure that you're still lighting them up, so you're accessing the resources, a little mini revivification. You're reinforcing those things. There's one, these are all correct, by the way, absolutely. There's one more thing I'm looking for, Con. Inducing them in terms of the state. Yes, you're revivifying the experience.
You create a rapport. This person really understands what I want.
There's a kind of rapport because this person feels like you know what they want. Oh, you're looking for values in terms of which ones contradict each other. Hopefully you'll have done that before you do this list, but if you haven't found it yet, this might help you kind of spot a conflict if there's going to be a conflict. The other reason, okay, one more.
You lock in the commitment before the offer.
Thank you. This is exactly it. He said you lock in the commitment before you make the offer. This is a very important principle of influence, and we'll talk a little bit more about Cialdini. Everyone heard of Robert Cialdini? The 6 laws of influence. I'll throw this. I'll give you those 6 laws a little later on, so you have them. Essentially, there's one of the principles that's called consistency and commitment. When people make a commitment to in a social context, in other words, to other people, they have to conform. They've got to remain consistent with that. So, for example, one of the tests was if you ask people, will you put this great big sign about slowing down traffic on your front lawn? They'll say no. It's ugly. It's on my lawn. But if one week someone comes around and says, are you civically minded? Yes. Well, do you mind putting this little civic sticker on your window, just a tiny little thing about, pleasant neighborhood or keep your neighborhood clean or something like that? And the week after that, someone completely different comes along and asks to put up that great big board about slow down and keep speeds down. They've already committed to being civically minded in public. Now they have to be consistent with that, so they're more likely to allow the board to come on. Make sense? This is very important in the whole influencing process. You may have noticed that whenever I talk to people in terms of some kind of a change process, especially those of you who see me do hypnotherapy, I always, always, always check back with them. So are you telling me it's this, this, and this? Is that correct? Yes. So it's this, this, and this. I have misunderstood you, right? Yes. Why? Because I'm locking them into that position. Now I can apply leverage and they can't move. If I say, well, okay, what about that? They go, oh, no, no, what I meant was this. Hang on a second, now you're confusing me. A moment ago you said it's this, this, and this. Is it or isn't it? Right? One of two things will happen. The consistency will either force them to stay consistent, and then that leverage allows you to break through to that point of change, or it'll force out new information that was unconscious for them before, that they weren't aware of, and by exposing the conflict, it actually exposes the thing you really need to know about. Either way is better as far as I'm concerned. Does that make sense to you guys? So consistency is absolutely crucial. So you need to ask, I'll come to you in a second, you need to ask them, so you're looking for X, Y, Z, and it does, A, B, C for you. Is that correct? Have I understood you correctly? So if I have a car, in this case, that does A, B, and C, and makes you feel like this and looks like that, then you have to buy it on the spot, right? Because they would just is exactly what you're looking for, right? Yeah. What have you just noticed? The hesitation. What's happened? So what does it tell you about me? There's something missing, isn't there? There is something missing in terms of what I've told you. Either those values aren't enough, there's something I haven't told you about, or you have a concern that hasn't been handled yet, that you need to handle before you offer the end of the deal. Do you see what I mean? Do you see? I mean, this is actually very, very simple when you start paying attention to people. Make sense? You had a question there?
Could we say that we want to...
Do you know, come up here? Exactly. There you go.
Could we look at it saying that we want to elicit their prime values and then anchor those values to the product or the vehicle?
Absolutely. That'll be one of the things that we're doing, amongst other things as well. Yes. But that's the core idea. So in terms of, in different language for you guys, we're going to bring up the emotions of the value and attach them to the product or service, so now they feel that way about the product or service. In other words, that will give them that value. In other words, whatever it is they're looking for, they will get by having this. Those of you who know my sort of background, I went from law to being an executive coach, and typically I would be coaching people twice my age, because I mean executives are in their late 40s, early 50s. I was about, I believe, 27 when I started. A little bit of a contrast there, right? And I remember one of the first people that I ended up coaching was someone who was doing so well that he almost got fired. And the reason for it was that he was basically burning his team out. So in terms of results, fantastic, but his team was being burned out, had a huge issue in terms of retention and so on. And so we're working, in this case, in sort of leadership coaching. So one of the things we ended up working with is for him to find out what the values of his team members were, the people that were working with him, and to the extent that he could actually make the job satisfy those values in them, well, to that extent, they couldn't possibly burn out, because the harder they worked, the more they achieved their life's purpose. Can I see how that works? There was no burnout rate. Their retention rate was sky high. People started volunteering to come back to the same department. All based on, and by the way, they're working just as hard as before, but rather being driven by someone else's value, which is basically what happens when people say, oh, our mission is to achieve superiority by complex suppositions of interesting managerial double talk that no one really understands. You're now plugging into an individual what they need, what they want out of life, and that becomes super motivating. Do you see how that works well again? So you see how this is a kind of really a useful framework, a model for pretty much any context. Yeah? Any comments or questions on what we've done so far? So in a moment you're going to go back to the same partner. You're going to have a little chit-chat. At the beginning, as somewhere in that chit-chat, once you get the conversation rolling again, I'll come to you in a minute if I may, you're going to offer them a summary of what they've told you in their terms, in their words. So you're going to say, so what you want is to really interact with others so that you can get out of your cave, have this pleasant life where people are enjoying themselves, having fun, and really enjoying life, where they're enjoying life and you're enjoying life. Is that what you're telling me? Is that what you want? Right? So you're just throwing that in, and you're going to weave in your drivers as well, so that it fits that kind of language. Once they've committed to that, you may even throw it in a few more times just to make sure they've really committed to those principles. What I want you to do is, I'd like you to create a future memory. Do you remember the reunification exercise where you painted a picture for them on a mountain or at a beach, or somewhere they haven't been yet. Do you remember that? I'd like for you to conversationally paint a picture for them of a time in the future where they have two things. One is your service, your product, the idea that you are hoping they will accept. And the other thing is all those values and those drivers woven together. You know, I can see you driving this car down the highway. It's exactly what Sean was talking about. I can see you driving this car and the freedom. You'd be the envy of everyone. What drivers am I using right now? Vengeance to some extent, right? Status, independence, possibly power. Do you see where we're going with this? You're painting a mental picture for them, using their values, using their drivers as the benefits, as a reason for them being in there. And the car now, if you'll excuse the pun, becomes a vehicle for experiencing their values. Does that make sense? That's all you have to do. It's really simple, isn't it? You'll summarize their values so that they accept, absolutely, this is what I want. And then you're going to paint them a picture where they have those values through the vehicle of in this case, the car, but of course it can be anything. It can be an idea, it can be a service, a product, and so on. Go ahead. Do you want to come up and ask this, or is it a very quick one?